He was standing there in his gray suit, looking proud and calm as the room echoed with claps and camera clicks. My dad's retirement party was in full swing, tables decorated in his favorite navy color, co-workers and old friends raising their glasses, and a slideshow playing memories from his 35-year-long career. I had helped plan every little detail from the food to the playlist. After all, it was a big day. A milestone. I stood near the cake table holding the gift box tightly in my hands. My palms were sweating a little, not because I was nervous, but because this gift meant something. I had saved for over a year to make it happen. Skipped my vacation, canceled my shopping, ate at home when my coworkers went out. Every dollar counted, and I counted every one. As the music faded, I walked toward him, trying to smile through the nerves. "This is for you, Dad," I said softly, handing him the black velvet box. People turned to watch. Even my mom looked up from her chair, and my sister paused her phone, scrolling just long enough to glance over. Dad took the box with a nod, opened it slowly, and his eyes fell on the Rolex inside. Shiny, gold-trimmed, limited edition. For a moment there was silence. And then a laugh. Not a happy one. A short, dry chuckle. He looked up at me and said, "Your sister would have given me more." I don't know how long I stood there frozen, but it felt like the whole room tilted. My heart dropped. I could feel eyes turning toward me, some curious, some uncomfortable. My throat dried up instantly. I wanted to speak, but I couldn't. My hands, which had been shaking just a little from excitement, now trembled from something colder. No one said a word. No one corrected him. My sister just smiled, that smug little smile she always did when she won something I didn't even know we were competing for. The silence was louder than any insult. A room full of people, yet I had never felt more alone. And right there in front of everyone, something inside me just snapped. I didn't say anything that night. I just stood there for a moment longer, staring at him, then slowly walked away. But as I moved through the crowd, something started to bubble up inside me. Not just anger, something deeper. A lifetime of memories crashing in at once. And I couldn't help but think back to where it all really started. Growing up, I was the kind of daughter who did everything right. I never broke curfew, never talked back. When Mom got sick that one winter, I was the one who stayed home to help her while my friends were out enjoying the snow. I'd heat soup, clean the kitchen, make sure she took her medicine. Even when I was a kid, I was always more grown up than I should have been. I started working part-time at 16, not because I had to, but because I knew the family needed help. I gave Mom half my paycheck every week. I still remember how her eyes welled up the first time I handed her that envelope. Dad didn't say much, just nodded, but I took that as approval. I clung to those small moments of recognition like they meant everything. I took that seriously too. Straight A's, full scholarship. I wanted to make them proud. Wanted to show them that their sacrifices weren't wasted. Every time I got an award, I hoped maybe this would be the one that made Dad look at me the way he looked at her. My sister. She was the opposite of me. Reckless. Loud. Always the center of attention. She crashed 2 cars before she turned 20 and still got her third from Dad on her birthday. If she failed a class, it was the teacher's fault. If she lost a job, someone was jealous of her. And Dad? He always had an excuse ready. She's just misunderstood, or she's got a good heart. But if I made one mistake, even a small one, it felt like the world ended. I remember once I missed a phone bill payment by 2 days while in college. Dad didn't speak to me for a week. A full week. But when my sister maxed out their joint credit card on a shopping spree in Vegas, he just sighed and said, "She'll learn." No matter what I did, how much I gave, how hard I tried, it was never enough. She always came first. Always. Even on family trips, if there was only one seat up front, he'd tell me to sit in the back so she could stretch her legs. If there was one extra ticket to a game or concert, it was hers. He called her his little star. Me. I was the sensible one. I can't count how many times I told myself, maybe one day he'll see me. Really see me. I thought maybe if I kept showing up, kept doing the right thing, something would change. But it never did. And still, after all those years, after all the love I poured into being the daughter he could count on, when it came time for me to give him the biggest gift of my life, he looked at it, looked at me, and thought of her. I guess I always knew where I stood. But that night he said it out loud. And once those words were out, there was no going back. After that night, it was easy to replay every little moment leading up to it. Like my mind refused to let me move on without showing me just how blind I'd been. The months before the retirement party had been filled with so much planning, budgeting, and quiet excitement. I had poured my heart into it not because anyone asked me to but because I wanted to. I truly wanted to make my dad feel celebrated, appreciated, remembered. The moment I found out they were throwing him a party, I started thinking about the gift. It had to be special. Not something random or flashy. Something that would mean something. I spent weeks researching, checking prices, watching reviews. That's when I found the Rolex. Not just any watch. It was a collector's edition. Elegant, timeless, and strong. Just like I thought he was. But it wasn't cheap. $20,000. I knew it would take a sacrifice. So I cut back on everything. I stopped going out to dinner, canceled a weekend getaway I had booked with friends, and even skipped buying a new couch I'd been saving up for. My evenings were spent comparing deals and putting away every spare dollar. Sometimes I'd walk by the shop where the watch was displayed, just to look at it again to remind myself why I was doing it. I imagined the look on Dad's face when he opened it. I imagined his eyes lighting up, maybe even getting a little teary. I thought he'd hug me. Say something like, "You really know me." That fantasy got me through so many hard days. Meanwhile, my sister didn't lift a finger. She didn't ask how the planning was going, didn't offer to help, didn't even pretend to care. In fact, she didn't show up to the venue until 40 minutes after the party had already started. She breezed in like a celebrity, wearing some sparkly dress, laughing loudly, giving air kisses to people she barely remembered. And she didn't bring a gift. Not a card. Not even flowers. Just walked in with her arms swinging and that same smug look she always wore, like the world was already hers. But the moment she arrived, everyone lit up. My dad's face changed. He beamed, waved her over, introduced her to some of his oldest friends like she was the pride of his life. No one asked where her gift was. No one cared that she was late. They just smiled and said, "Oh, she's so full of life, isn't she?" Me. I stood in the background holding that expensive box, trying to convince myself it would all be worth it. That once he opened it, things would finally shift. That maybe, just maybe, he'd finally see the daughter who never asked for anything but gave everything anyway. He held the box in his hands, right there at the center of the room, all eyes on us. I remember the sound of the wrapping tearing as he peeled it open, the excited chatter quieting down. And when he finally lifted the lid and saw the watch, there was a small flicker of surprise in his eyes. Just for a second. I held my breath. But then he laughed. Not the kind of laugh you give when you're touched or overwhelmed. No, this was different. He looked up, right at me, then around at the guests and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Wow. You should have let your sister pick this out. She would have given me something even better." There was a pause. A sharp, horrible pause where everything froze. I could feel the smile slowly falling from my face as my heart dropped to my stomach. Around us, the room went quiet. A few people let out awkward chuckles, not sure how to react. One guest actually gasped. I looked at my mom. She didn't say anything. Just looked down at her lap like she wished she could disappear. And my sister? She was standing off to the side, wine glass in hand, grinning like she had just won something. I could feel a burning behind my eyes, but I didn't let it show. I didn't cry. I just stood there stunned. After everything. After all the effort, the money, the thought, he still saw me as second place. Not even worth a thank you. I wanted to scream, to ask him why. But I couldn't find the words. Not then. Not while he still had the box open, still laughing with people who thought this was just another family joke. I couldn't breathe. The air in the room felt thick, like the weight of every single one of my dad's words was pressing down on me. For a moment I thought I might collapse. But then something inside me snapped. I couldn't just stand there, couldn't let that comment hang in the air. I had spent so much time trying to make him proud, trying to prove that I was worth his love, and he just tore it all down with a sentence. Without saying another word, I reached for the box. His eyes widened as I gently pulled it out of his hands. I didn't even look at him. I couldn't. I just turned on my heel, my heart pounding in my chest, and walked straight toward the nearest waitress. She stood there, tray in hand, looking confused as I handed her the box. "Here," I said, my voice steady, though it felt like my entire body was shaking. "This is for you." She blinked at me, not sure if this was some kind of joke, but I didn't wait for her to react. I couldn't afford to. I turned back to my father, my heart racing but my face calm, controlled. Almost like I wasn't standing in the middle of a room full of people who were now staring at me. "Then let her handle the bills," I said, my words cold, each one falling like a hammer. The room fell dead silent. The sound of the clinking glasses, the music, the background noise, all of it disappeared. I felt every pair of eyes on me as I looked my dad square in the eye, challenging him, daring him to respond. He didn't. I could feel the shockwave ripple through the crowd. The whispers began almost immediately. People didn't know what to say, how to react. Some gasped in disbelief. Others just stared, unsure of what had just happened. Even my sister, who had been smugly watching the entire scene unfold, faltered for a second. But only for a second. I didn't wait for anyone to make sense of it. I turned and walked out of that room, my head held high, not for them but for me. For the first time in my life, I didn't care about what anyone else thought. I wasn't playing by their rules anymore. The silence after I walked out of that party felt like the loudest noise I'd ever heard. The door slammed behind me, and for a moment I stood there on the other side of it, feeling the weight of everything that had just happened. But I didn't turn back. I couldn't. I was too far gone to take any of it back. The next day the floodgates opened. My phone was buzzing relentlessly as soon as I woke up. It didn't stop until late into the night. The messages started with my dad, of course. I had expected that. He always thought he could explain things away, like he could somehow smooth over everything with a few well-chosen words. His message was long, apologetic in a way, but still filled with that condescending tone I'd heard all my life. "I didn't mean it like that," he wrote. "You know I love you. It's just that your sister is a little more understanding of my needs." Understanding of his needs. The same sister who couldn't be bothered to show up on time, the one who thought love was a transaction? I wasn't having any of it. I didn't even bother to reply. Then there was my mom. Her message was filled with the usual guilt trip tactics, the ones I had become so familiar with over the years. "Honey, don't overreact. It's just a joke. Your dad didn't mean to hurt you." But I knew better. It wasn't a joke. It was an insult. A hurtful public put-down that was meant to remind me that no matter what I did, I would never be his favorite. Never be enough. Next came my sister's barrage of angry texts and calls. "You embarrassed Dad in front of everyone. You humiliated him, and now look at what you've done." Her tone was full of venom, like I was the one who had ruined everything. "Why can't you just let things go? You're always making everything so dramatic. Dad's been doing his best and you know it." It didn't matter how many times I read those messages. They didn't change anything. They only fueled the anger that had been brewing inside me for years. I couldn't even bring myself to pick up the phone when she called. By mid-afternoon my dad tried again, this time with a more desperate tone. "Let's talk about this, okay? You've got to understand I didn't mean it the way it came out. Can we meet for lunch? I need to fix this, please." I was done. I knew what was coming. He wanted to smooth things over, make it like it never happened, and move on like he always did. But I couldn't do that anymore. I couldn't sit across from him, pretending everything was fine when he had just made me feel like nothing. I didn't respond to any of them. The messages piled up, one after another, trying to manipulate me into feeling guilty for standing up for myself. But I didn't care. For the first time I was finally listening to my own voice, and it wasn't about pleasing anyone else. I walked away from their drama, their guilt, and their expectations. I knew they would keep trying to make me the villain, but I wasn't buying it anymore. For an entire week I stayed silent. Not a single text, not a word to anyone. I knew they were expecting me to cave in, to respond, to apologize for causing a scene, but I didn't. I was done. Done with being the responsible one. Done with being the one they leaned on when it was convenient for them. Done with the emotional toll that came with being the one who was always trying to please everyone else. It wasn't even about the $20,000 gift anymore. It was about everything else. All the years of being second best, of being overlooked, of being nothing more than the invisible daughter who did what was asked but was never truly valued. I was done trying to make them see my worth. I waited a full week. I wanted them to think I was going to back down. I wanted them to think I would come to my senses, maybe even beg for forgiveness. But that wasn't going to happen. Not anymore. Then when the time was right, I began to take action. I started with the mortgage. I had co-signed the mortgage years ago, right alongside my dad, because he had promised me that we were a team, that everything would be shared equally. But I had learned the hard way that my place in his eyes was never equal to my sister's. He had made that clear at the party. So, the next morning I called the mortgage company. I told them I wanted my name removed from the loan. It wasn't easy. It never is. They tried to talk me out of it, to convince me that it would hurt my credit, that it might complicate things for everyone. But I was beyond caring. It wasn't my problem anymore. I wasn't going to be tied to something that only reminded me of years of sacrifice and disappointment. Once that was done, I moved on to the health insurance. I had always been the one to make sure everyone was covered, the one who made the calls, dealt with the paperwork and made sure their medical needs were met. I was the backup plan, the safety net. But it was time to cut that too. I contacted the insurance company and had my name removed from all the paperwork. I didn't need to be the one called in an emergency anymore. They had never really seen me as anything more than a resource, so why should I continue to act like one? Next came the emergency contact lists. I had been my father's emergency contact for years. If something happened, I was the first person they would call. It was a role I had worn like a badge of honor, but now it felt more like a burden. So, I contacted the hospital where his records were held and requested that my name be removed. The woman on the phone seemed a little surprised, but she didn't question it. I was done being the first call when his life took a turn. Let him see if his favorite daughter would be there when he needed her. Then I went after the business. My dad's business was a family-run operation, and I had always been there, helping him when he needed it. Even when it was late nights and long hours, I had stayed by his side, helping him with accounts, managing customer relations, doing whatever needed to be done. I had been his backup account for years. But now that role was gone. I didn't want to be a part of it anymore. I didn't want my name on any financial document that linked me to him. I remember the moment I called the bank. I felt a strange sense of power and relief as I spoke to the banker, telling him to remove my name from the backup account. "This is no longer something I want to be involved with," I said, my voice steady and firm. There was no hesitation, no second-guessing myself. I was reclaiming my own life, piece by piece, severing the invisible ties that had kept me attached to them for far too long. It wasn't just about the money or the material things anymore. It was about my identity. About taking back control over my own future. And when everything was finally done, when all the forms were processed and my name was officially erased from their lives, I felt lighter. Not free exactly, but close enough. But it wasn't over yet. I knew this move would send shockwaves through the family. I knew they would come for me, trying to make me feel guilty, trying to convince me I was making a mistake. They would say I was being petty, that I was punishing them for something that wasn't their fault. But I was prepared. I had spent years absorbing their mistakes, their disappointments, their constant disregard for everything I did. Now it was my turn. And I wasn't going to let them manipulate me into thinking that I owed them anything. I had already made my peace. I didn't need their approval, their permission, or their love. And I would stand by that decision no matter what came next. The days after I cut all ties with my family were the quietest, most peaceful days I had ever experienced. It was as if I had been holding my breath for so long, trying to keep everything together, trying to please them, and now I could finally exhale. The weight that had been pressing on my shoulders for so many years seemed to lift, and I felt lighter, freer, than I had in ages. For the first time in my life, I wasn't burdened by expectations. I wasn't carrying the emotional weight of being the one who always gave, always sacrificed, always tried to make everyone happy. I spent those weeks rediscovering myself. I focused on the things I had neglected for so long, things that had always been put on the back burner while I put my family first. I started doing things for myself, no longer worrying about anyone else's needs or wants. I took long walks in the mornings, began painting again, and started picking up hobbies I had abandoned years ago. My friends, the ones who had always been there for me, noticed a change in me. They could see the difference in how I carried myself, in the way I spoke. I was no longer the girl who quietly bore the weight of everyone else's drama. I was becoming someone who mattered. I started seeing my worth, valuing my own peace and happiness above everything else. And then one day it all came full circle. I had been living my life, doing the things I loved, and feeling content when the phone call came. It was early in the morning and I wasn't expecting anything. The number on the caller ID wasn't familiar, but I picked up anyway. "Hello." I answered, unsure who it could be. The voice on the other end was calm but with an edge of urgency. "Hello, is this my name?" "Yes, who is this?" "This is the nurse at hospital name. We're calling because your father is here and we need an emergency contact." Unfortunately, he listed no emergency contact on his paperwork. I felt the blood drain from my face. The words hung in the air for a moment, unspoken emotions flooding my chest. For a split second I thought about rushing to the hospital, doing what I had always done, rushing to his side like I used to. But then I remembered everything. I remembered the hurt, the betrayal, the years of feeling less than, of feeling invisible. I had made my choice. I had made peace with it. I didn't say anything at first. I just sat there staring at the phone in my hand. The nurse waited, probably expecting me to react, but I stayed silent. After what felt like an eternity, I quietly said, "Thank you for letting me know," and hung up the phone. There was no anger, no resentment, no tears. Just an overwhelming sense of calm. For the first time, I didn't feel the need to be there for him. I didn't feel like I had to fix everything, like I had to drop everything and rush to his side. He hadn't valued me when I was always there, so why should I be there now? And that was it. That was the moment I truly knew that I had made the right choice. I had stepped out of the shadows and into my own light. It was a strange kind of peace, one that came from knowing that I had taken control of my life. Life wasn't perfect, but it was mine. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough.